I am convinced, I have come to the conclusion that everyone, no matter what their individual personal theology happens to be, or eschatology happens to be, their belief about end things, or an afterlife, everyone actually does definitively believe in a good place or bad place that everyone inevitably inhabits after they die. Now, I've always been suspicious of this due to the fact that I'm a Christian and I believe what the Bible says when it says things like that no one is without excuse, that everyone's conscience bears witness to this truth. However, there's a lot of people whose consciences have been seared, possibly by their behavior, possibly by their inheritance or heritage, so that they think that they've somehow transcended this idea of an afterlife. And all they've done is deceive themselves. And the way to know for sure is that when some celebrity dies, some famous person passes beyond the veil, social media will become profuse, will be awash in memes showing that individual being welcomed into this glorious, sun-bathed cloud scene alongside various other celebrities that have also recently died. And it'll be this loose mishmash of all sorts of famous people from various different spheres of life, different levels of contribution to arts and science and politics, etc. And it doesn't matter what any of those individuals actually believed. If they are Christians, if they were Muslims, if they were any sort of atheist or agnostic, none of that matters. But because the person posting or sharing the meme had a personal subjective appreciation for those individuals' contributions to, let's say, rock music, they may have been terribly immoral on the side, sexually and otherwise, doesn't matter. Because you value the music they performed, because you value the scientific discoveries they may have made, because you value the television programs they starred in or movies they starred in, they're given a free ticket into the atrium. And on the converse, if a person dies and you didn't appreciate their contributions, you didn't value the things that they offered to society, then they took an express elevator downwards. They took a long dirt nap in the burning place. One example of this is in the wake of the Supreme Court decision involving Hobby Lobby, which affirmed the rights of an employer to have its own moral limitations on what its health coverage will permit or allow, that it doesn't have to provide abortifacients as a form of health care. In the wake of that, every secularist, every atheist, every agnostic, every feminist, every humanist that I was personally aware of posted something to the effect on Twitter or Facebook, "See you in hell, Hobby Lobby." Now, these are people that would, if you ask them pointedly, if they even believe that hell is a real place, they would say no. But they are making a moral judgment about a decision made, and they're saying that it is morally evil, that it would be deserving of if it existed. And of course, the mustache man from Germany, the mustache man from Russia, the clean-shaven man from China, these are individuals, or from Cambodia, those individuals tend to be ones that everyone universally, the bearded man from Cuba, tends to be those that most individuals would fairly conclusively agree, if there's a bad place, they inhabit it. Ironically, though, many of the people, as mentioned, the secularists, the pseudo-feminist types that I've known, the progressive types that I've known in the past, would advocate for the policies of those individuals while at the same time morally ascribing them to a bad place, saying that the policies they wanted were good, but the outcomes that they produced were evil. You can try to figure that math out on your own, because I certainly haven't solved those equations. Nevertheless, all this is building towards a meme that I accidentally discovered due to the fact that I've been talking about one Charlie Kirk, or at least I've said his name out loud on a few videos that I've made recently. It's thrown my algorithm all out of whack. And one thing that has occurred in the wake of that, people were talking about context of Charlie's statements about things like race or about sexual equality and various other subjects of this, saying that if you added context to it, it would make it make sense. That people were quoting him out of context to make him sound as if he was evil, or that he was racist, or that he was sexist, or that he was all of these sorts of things. And then his apologist saying, if you just add the correct context, that it would make it make sense. And a meme that was shared around was Mr. Rogers was someone that you didn't need to add context to his statements in order to make them make sense. And this is why I've kind of set up this primer in the initial phase, talking about how there's this good place and bad place that everyone subjectively ascribes dead people into. That if you like, or that you prefer, or that if you respected, you admired an individual, they get an automatic elevator to the good place. And if you didn't respect them, then they get an automatic elevator to the bad place. And Mr. Rogers is clearly one of these individuals that, because he was respected heavily by people of my generation and below, millennials and younger, when he died, he got the express treatment straight to the good place. And I believe that he is genuinely in heaven. But what I'm saying is that there a lot of the controversy that did in fact exist about things that he did genuinely say has just simply been forgotten. And that in fact context did need to be added to a lot of things that he said while he was alive in order to make it fully make sense. We've just forgotten that because we've essentially romanticized our understanding of him, our memory of him. A few examples of this is that I don't think anybody that's on the secular side that does respect the work and the outcomes of Mr. Rogers' neighborhood would remember he was an ordained Presbyterian minister, that he was conservative in all of his theology and his social orientations and his political opinions. For example, the man who's the postman in the show, Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood, was a homosexual man, and that a contractual obligation of him being on the show with Mr. Rogers was that he was forbidden from performing homosexual behaviors. Like, he was forbidden from frequenting homosexual establishments, bars and clubs and such, while he was on the show. and that the man willingly complied with that condition in order to remain in the program. But if there was to be a, let's say, a revelation, an exposure to say that somebody that was running any show in today's society or trying to field any film production in today's society, and that the director or the showrunner or the producer of that show said a condition of an individual who was homosexual by their own confession, that in order for them to be on the show, that they could not be, or they could not express that homosexuality by any means, whatever they felt was appropriate, that showrunner, that producer, that host of the show would immediately be deplatformed. That's something that Mr. Rogers did. And I think that if most secularists that I'm aware of now, because of how aggressive and rabid they are, if they knew that, their opinion about the man could change. That's a context to add. Another thing was that the idea of the "you are special," the personal affirmation of children that Mr. Rogers' neighborhood was so famous for, and that Mr. Rogers individually was so famous for, actually went through a period of scapegoatedness in the mid-90s to the early 2000s, in which they were saying that children becoming entitled and selfish, and that adults moving into the workforce, having grown up with Mr. Rogers, that were entitled, selfish, maybe kind of prickish, that he was personally responsible for that. And that, in fact, he was the root cause of this moral degeneracy in our society, because he was telling people that they deserve to be respected, loved, and appreciated just for being alive. He was attributed to, or that he was equated with, the participation trophy society and things of that nature. Like, all of that came along. Now, we've forgotten about all of that because, again, on the one hand, wanting to emblazon the memory of that great man. I have no, and maybe I should pause, I have nothing but respect for Mr. Rogers, but there's context to add. And last but not least, this last little bit of context was that at his funeral, which might be one of the most significant funerals that's been held in recent memory, not very many people more heavily celebrated in that moment than he was, there were protesters at the church and at the graveside, because something that plagued Mr. Rogers his entire career was allegations of homosexuality, because he was soft-spoken. Now, there was something of a weird little reaction to those allegations, saying that he was like a Green Beret and that he had tattoos all over his body that he covered with his sweaters and things. None of that is true. And he wasn't homosexual either. In fact, if you've seen Won't You Be My Neighbor, the documentary about him produced by the estate of Mr. Rogers, the man, the postman, the homosexual postman, even claims like that he wasn't gay. Like, that if anybody would have known, he would know. He's not. He's not. And he wasn't. His whole life, he was just a gentle, soft-spoken man that loved and cared about and appreciated and wanted to motivate an entire generation of people to love and appreciate children in their pure and undefiled innocence. But his entire career was also paralleled by Rambo and Rocky Balboa and Arnold Schwarzenegger and all of like the 80s brutal combat action movies and the Quentin Tarantino bloodbath films and Pulp Fiction and all of these things, westerns of Clint Eastwood and things that portrayed men as exclusively, mostly, the silent but violent protagonist, often with very little ties to women, very little ties to children, that weren't exploitative or aggressive and borderline rapacious and things. Like, that's the stream of what most of Hollywood was producing as what a man is or could be or might even should be. And alongside that, you had this man who was producing public access programming for children, where he was surrounded by children in the studio, and that he never raised his voice, and that he never did anything violent. And so there was an undercurrent of people that were accusing him of being closet homosexual, of being closet pansy, and things of that nature, which was inappropriate and false, but it badgered him, it plagued him his entire life, even to the ceremonies of his death. That's context to add. Because again, I couldn't respect the man more. But you have to understand all of these things about him in order to understand all of the things that he said. There was people that were saying the reason that he claims to love children is because he's actually a danger to them, but he wasn't. But you have to add in context for you to understand fully everything about him. And so what I'm essentially saying is everyone needs to be quoted and spoken of and appreciated, I suppose, in their correct context. Because if you would have allowed those critics and protesters at his funeral to have the last say about Mr. Rogers, you would have a very different opinion about him now. And if you were to give the last say about Charlie Kirk, those people who were critical of him after his death, you would have a very different opinion of him than you might otherwise. You have to do complete research into these things and not just let memes decide how you feel about anyone, living, dead, or otherwise.